So one of my first ways into spirituality was through Buddhism. When I was seeking, it wasn't like it is for you guys now, where there's YouTube and access to the internet to find all these teachers. Even though the internet existed, it wasn't, I don't know if it was being used like that. I didn't know how to look it up or what to look up. The internet was just beginning, so maybe that information wouldn't have been on there anyway. So I found Buddhism through a friend, the old-fashioned way of doing it, a friend telling me and talking about it. And I started going to the Buddhist center. I'd already done loads of investigation before that. I had been investigating, this is going to sound weird, but through literature and theatre and artists through art. And then my friend introduced me to Buddhism. And I started going to the local Buddhist center. They also introduced me to other teachers like satsangs and things, but Buddhism seemed more accessible for me. They had lots of courses on, and there was a group near me where I could go regularly. And it seemed like the Buddhist center seemed like a library for me, like all this information that I could get to. And I found the story of the Buddha so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And if you don't know the story of the Buddha, I'm going to tell you the story of the Buddha, or the story of his life, just a bit. I'm sure there's some people that know it better than I do, but this is just from my memory of learning about the story of the Buddha. So when the Buddha was born, he was born into an incredibly rich family. He was born a prince. And the tradition is that when the prince is born, the astrologer will read the prince's astrology. And the astrologer came and he said, this prince is either going to be a great king or an even better spiritual leader. And the king was really distressed by this, because he didn't want his son to be a spiritual leader. He wanted his son to be a great king. And so he threatened over this. And he decided that the best way to bring up his son, to make sure he would be a great king, was to not expose him to anything outside the palace walls. So, when the Buddha was growing up, he wasn't allowed to see anything outside the palace walls. He was only allowed to see in the palace walls. And inside the palace walls, the king decided not to show his son any form of suffering. He felt if he didn't show his son suffering, then he'd never ask questions and he'd never get interested in spirituality. So inside the palace walls, he eliminated what he considered suffering, which was death, sickness, and I think the other one was emotional pain, so emotional distress. And so the prince grew up inside these walls, this perfect life. He had enough money, he had enough food. Actually, maybe it was death, sickness and hunger or poverty. I've forgotten what the last one was. Emotional distress. I've forgotten what the third one was. But anyway, the prince grew up with the most amazing life. He never could need or want anything. He always had everything he needed or wanted. And he never knew about death. He never understood about death. He never experienced sickness or emotional distress. Everything was always perfect. And then one day when the prince was sitting in the gardens, I think this is how it goes. I'm making it up. It's a long time since I actually read this story. So the king, one day the prince, so the Buddha, his name was Gautama then. Gautama was sat in the gardens of the palace, and over the wall flew a dying swan. So an injured swan flew into the gardens, and for the first time the Buddha experienced sickness. And of course this made him question everything. He'd never seen it before, so suddenly to see something sick where he didn't have that in his vocabulary, he began to question everything. And of course, he was a teenager by now. He wanted to leave the palace walls, but the king wouldn't let him. But he decided to leave the palace walls, and he managed to sneak out. And he was devastated by what he saw. The Buddhists are very precise, so they had all these things that happened to him along the way. I can't remember exactly. It's like the first time he saw someone dying, and he saw someone that had lost their son, so he saw someone grieving. He saw all these different things. And of course, it began to make him question the nature of reality. And he began to grow this heavy heart as to why there was suffering in life, as to why these things happened. Until eventually it got to the point where he just had to leave. He had to go and find the answers to his questions. And in Buddhism they have something called the Four Noble Truths. And just to be precise, I'm going to read them out to you. I'm just going to look them up on the internet. Exact word to word. From the Buddhist group that I used to be in. So this is the Eightfold Path. The 5 precepts. That's not it. The Four Noble Truths. So all existence is dukkha, which means suffering. So all existence is suffering. That's the first noble teaching. So the first noble teachings, I'll read it out. The Buddha's insight was that our lives are a struggle and we do not find ultimate happiness or satisfaction in anything we experience. This is the problem of existence. So life as we know it as a separate person, so life in time is suffering. So the life as the human knows it is suffering. This is the first noble truth. And the realization of this, I think, is the second noble truth. So actually that's the first one. So realizing that all existence is suffering. So the existence in time is suffering. So the human life is suffering. Number 2, the cause of suffering is craving. So the cause of suffering is the craving for material objects to satisfy you, which they never will. Number 3, the sensation of suffering comes from the cessation, so the stopping of craving. So the end of suffering is the end of craving. Craving to find happiness in the flow, craving to find happiness in time. So the first noble truth is seeing that suffering is time, is your life in time. The second is seeing that the cause of suffering is the craving to find a solution to your pain in time, to the solution to your suffering in time, in material objects. The third is that the end of suffering comes from the end of craving for material objects to satisfy you. The fourth, the path that leads from suffering. So the fourth noble truth is the path that leads to the end of suffering. This is the Four Noble Truths. Now, everyone's like, okay, what's the path? And the path is a path. But to really collapse that one that's seeking for freedom in time, to end the suffering in time, it's seeing that the one that's walking along the path, believing it's going to achieve something, is the suffering. You and time are the same thing. You, the separate you, and craving are the same thing. Your whole life is about seeking. Is about trying to get somewhere else than what's happening. This is what's happening. This is the freedom. Life is the freedom. And what do I mean by life and what's actually happening? Because in what's actually happening, there is no seeking. There is no attempt to get somewhere. The body is so used to seeking, to having someone that believes it exists and believes that it's going to find freedom in the future. That one day you're going to arrive there and you become like this with enlightenment. I'm going to listen to this and I'm going to arrive at enlightenment. I'm going to get there. But all seeking, including that, is an illusion, because you, the one you're imagining yourself to be, doesn't exist. And you'll notice that all spiritualities and all spiritual traditions talk about this seeking part. It's always that it's not found in the flow. It's about the moment, it's about presence, and all the teachers argue about different ways to say this. Some say there is no body, and in the collapse of nobody, all that's left is what is. And all there is what is. Some say be in the moment, and the other ones say, but who would be in the moment? And everyone loves to have a good old argument. We're very good at that. Humans. An argument about nothing. Some point to consciousness. So that's a school I came from. I also came from the school of there is nobody. So some point to what do they point to? Oh, the consciousness teaching, that it's all consciousness, it's all perception. And that's true to an extent. All there is perceiving itself, but that perception, that consciousness is not separate from the appearances. So all there is what is, all there is this moment. That consciousness isn't actually a thing, all things are consciousness. So you can endlessly say this in different ways. And the mind believes, like I used to believe, that one day I'll mentally arrive, I'll mentally get there, but this has got nothing to do with the mentality. What happens is the mind gets less complicated, so as it begins to explore this subject, it unpicks all its complicated thinking and unpicks that energetic cluster that it has in the body, because all your thinking becomes energetic. So the belief in the self makes it feel like there's an energetic center inside the body. The belief that you're a bad person makes it feel like there's a bad person inside the body, or a fat person, or a thin person. That's why anorexic people, they feel like they're fat, even though they're not, because that's the belief system they have in play. And some people that are just average size can believe that. This isn't somebody's realization. What happens to that somebody is it just begins to crumble. Everything you believe to be true. And there's this energetic movement back to this stillness that you are, that nobody's experiencing this. Nobody was born and nobody dies. So if you imagine yourself disappearing now, so imagine that you disappear, or that you appear, or that you exist. Who is it that's imagining that? So notice that there's something else beyond the imagining of you. So when you dream at night, you believe in the dream that you're having an experience and you're separate from the dream. So when you dream as if you're this body in the dream. So you're walking around your dream at night and you think it's all real. And you think you're in relationship with things. You think you're walking along the road. And you think you are whatever you think in the dream, or whatever your body is in the dream. If you look in the mirror, you believe you're that body you see. But actually you're the dreamer of that dream, and you're everything that's in that dream. And that's how this is working. So you imagine yourself disappearing, or you imagine yourself getting enlightened, but notice there is something which is registering that, experiencing, or that imagination of you, that imagination of you getting there or not getting there. Becoming enlightened or disappearing. But there's something that never disappears, that's always here, and that's presence. And this presence is undescribable, it's registering everything, but it's not separate from anything. So you believe you're inside the body looking out at the world, but where is this you that's inside the body? There is no you inside this body. Who is it that's looking out? Everything that you imagine about you is being experienced. And when it's seen that that's not who you are, then it's also seen that that presence, the experiencer, doesn't have any distance from all things it's experiencing. It is one and the same movement. The experiencing is prior to the person. The person is appearing in experiencing. And that experiencing doesn't start or stop anywhere. It's not a thing. It's nothing. Yet it's simultaneously everything. So now when you feel, so say I'm feeling my cup with my drink in it, and the mind prior to the shift believes, okay, I'm feeling the cup, and it's constantly carrying this image that it's carrying the cup, that the hands end here, and that's the edge of you, so it gives that experience. But actually, if you just shut your eyes, in the very moment of everything, without thinking, without going into time, your fingers don't end at the cup. There is only sensation happening, and that sensation isn't a size. That sensation is free, and it's appearing everywhere, and is everything. This is coming back to life again. It's radical freedom. It's the same with your bum on the seat. You think, I'm sitting on a seat in England, in a nice country, in a rich country, in a nice room. And none of that's true. That's what we can describe in time. In the actuality of it, there isn't even sitting on the seat. There is simply sensation, and that sensation isn't a size. That sensation is infinite. It's undefinable. And you aren't in relationship to things in this moment. There is only this moment. Relationship doesn't appear here. And this is who you truly are. This is the aspect of you that you've forgotten. And I'm not saying or suggesting that you as a person take this on board. The person in time speaks in time and does things in time. Like I have responsibility for Khaleesi. I have commitments tomorrow and next week and blah, blah, blah. So the person in time exists in that world, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the suffering comes when you believe that's who you are, and then you look to find the aliveness, the presence in that timeline, in what you do next week, in what you do in 10 years' time. Whereas that radical aliveness, that freedom you're looking for, is in the very presence of what's happening. It's so orgasmic. But to you, you don't feel it's orgasmic because the illusory you is uncomfortable. The illusory you is constantly telling itself, this isn't enough, this isn't good enough, I've done something wrong, I'm bad. So the illusory you is having an uncomfortable experience and trying to get to a future moment or back to a past moment. And it's carrying all this worry and stress because it believes that it can control time. And that it's your job to control time, and it's your job to get to it. And the person is always in this stressful dynamic of, I've got a life and I've got to have a happy life. And I've got to obtain things and get things and make things solid. We're taught so many false belief patterns. That it's your job to keep things together, that it's your job to be happy. And happiness is owning things. Happiness is financial security. Happiness is buying things. Happiness is. It's your nature. And you guys listening, so we got 93 people listening at the moment. And maybe there'll be some in the future listening. That's weird. So there's 90, it's gone down to 90 now. 3 of them are like, oh fuck, she can see me. Sometimes people think that I can see them. I have had some conversations with people where they thought I could equally see them sitting in their living room. So they're sitting there, you know, acting very nicely and behaving very well because they think I can see them watching me. I can't see you. That would be very complicated to have 92 TV cameras on my computer right now. So you sit there and you're having all your judgments about me and what I'm saying, and you don't see that those judgments mean nothing. Nothing. So you're judging whether I'm saying it right or wrong, or you're enjoying it or not, or you want to get there or not, and none of that means anything. They're coming and going. Those thoughts are coming and going, but to most people, you believe your thoughts are true. So you're like, she's saying this correctly, or, oh, she's not saying this correctly, or, oh, I don't like what she's saying, or she's got a big ego, she's got a tiny ego, she's got no ego. Whatever you're saying, that just comes and goes and doesn't mean anything. That's got nothing to do with freedom. But most of the time you're sitting there and you believe that you're getting yourself to freedom, so you've got to defend yourself against right concepts and wrong concepts. But actually your freedom is the experiencing of this now. The very direct, intimate experience of what's happening. So you are that experiencing, and that experiencing is not a thing. Not a thing. And yet it's everything. Everything. So the experiencer is non-located. You'll never find a location of you. Never. Where is the location of you? You see, the illusory you makes it feel like there's a location because you're telling yourself you're not good enough or you're bad, and then you're having these energetic contractions inside the body and these emotional feelings inside the body that sucks it all in and makes it feel like there's a solid person in here. But actually in all exploration, you'll see, even though it's you that sees, but you'll see that none of that equals a you. So what is it that equals a you? So, you know, most people in the material world would believe that a you is your actions, your behavior. That's the character. So that's what I would say is the character. Like Lisa, the character is, well, lots of different things. And there could be a description of her. So what is it that is this you? Yeah, it seems to be working. So everything you could describe about you, notice it's something in time. And notice that you never have time. Never. You only ever have this current moment. You never own time. You're only ever here. Even though the things around you change, the objects change. So you walk through a house or you walk through a room and it seems like the object changes. You're only ever in the present moment. You can never be in the future or the past. It's always the present. Always the present. So if you think about it like an old-fashioned movie recorder. So you've got this old-fashioned movie recorder, and at the light, you have the light, just a plain white light that shines through a projector, and then all these images go through the projector, but this light is still, and these images are all still pictures. They're totally still, but when the light goes through them on the movie screen, what people see when they're sitting in the audience is a movie screen where these pictures are moving, and there is a time. There is a timeline, there is a story that's going on, that's happening. But actually, in the background, what's happening is there is a still light and the still pictures, but these pictures are moved quickly, and it presents something moving in time. So you could say the still light is like the experiencer. Like that is who you are, is that still light that's shining through something that moves, and it gives the appearance the movement's happening. So who you are is this still watcher of everything, this experiencer, and that watcher is so still that it's not separate from everything that's moving. It actually means, ultimately, that movement is still. I know that's really complicated. But the illusory you gets stuck in so many different games, always looking for something to be. Wants to be enlightened, wants to be a nice person, wants to understand this, and it always believes that what it sees in itself, so the person, the character that's coming, thinking, knowing, understanding, has some truth about it and is going somewhere, but actually there's nowhere to go. There is only presence. There is only presence happening. So your freedom, your answer comes here. Not in what you think, right here. Who is it that's experiencing the thinking? And see that the experiencer isn't separate from all things and is only here. It's timeless. Time was a human invention. The world was a human invention. This is the freedom. Here, here, here. So there has to be this exploration into the present moment. Who? But that's not prescription, because there is nobody I could prescribe to. It's just a description of what can happen. And that description of what can happen is what undoes the illusory self.